So, first of all, tell me where you're from. Where are you?
Originally from Tracy, California.
Okay. So, you graduated high school, or did
I graduated high school early.
And early, good.
Yeah.
And then, did you join, or were you drafted?
I joined, but I tried to go in a different branch of service, and my uncle caught me. Because I had 6 uncles in World War II in the Navy.
Okay.
So I didn't get to go. I had to go in the Navy.
What were you trying to go into?
Marine Corps.
But Navy was the family way, huh?
Navy was the only way. Yeah. My sister called my uncle. He was still in the Navy, and he was a commander.
Uh-oh.
And he called that Marine recruiter. And when I went in to sign the final paperwork, because I was supposed to go to San Francisco for induction, he took me to the Navy office. They finished up the paperwork. But yeah, it was funny. I tried.
Yeah.
But I loved the Navy. I really did.
So what year did you join?
1961.
Okay. And how old were you?
17.
Wow. So you went into training, and then you were assigned to were you originally assigned to the USS Midway?
No, I was at Whidbey Island, Washington to start with for 2 years.
Okay.
2.5 years. And then I went to the Hancock, which was a wooden deck carrier. And then I went to the Midway. And I went on the Midway early 1965 and we were the first carrier group to go into Vietnam.
And a lot of people don't think of the Navy when they think of Vietnam. So what were your...
Well, I was flight deck director. In our 9 months, we sent in excess of 11.5 million tons of armament into Vietnam.
That's a lot of planes with a lot of ammo.
We had 103 airplanes on board. We had F-4s, F-8s, A-4s, A-1s, and we had a tanker, A-3D tanker.
And where were you
I was
in
on
the
flight
water?
deck.
But where were you in the water?
We were the original Tonkin Golf Yacht Club.
Yacht Club, huh?
We were the original. Our carrier group consisted of the Midway, Coral Sea, and the Ranger. We were all sister ships. The Midway and then the Coral Sea, then the Ranger all came out in 45.
Okay. You mean they came out as in they launched then?
They launched.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So flight deck director?
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of things going on all at once. I mean, describe what a flight director
What you do is you
does.
bring, on launches, you direct the planes up to the catapults. You have directors up on the catapults. You have the yellow shirts all over the place, all over the flight deck, because we bring them.
And you're moving them from
parking.
And parking is where? Some of them are up there,
when you're getting ready for the launch, everything is aft, as far as we can get it.
Okay.
The prop jobs, the A-1 Sky Raiders, they were leftover World War II planes and used in Korea a lot, but they could carry more armament than a jet could, and they could deck launch. They didn't have to have the cats.
Okay.
So they were the last ones off. And you had to take everything by weight. So normally, our fighters would go up first. The A4s would put them in the air first because they were primary fighters. They, of course, carry armament over the country, but most of theirs was defense for our bombers.
Okay.
And then they would launch their armament. So they would go first, the F8s would go second, and then the F4s. And the reason being, because you have to set the catapults for the weight of each plane, because you're taking them from 0 to 160 miles an hour and 80 feet. You know, it's just
Right.
basically, well, it's more than 80 feet, but
It's not very long.
it's not very far. No. This building is probably about the same length, you know.
Yeah.
So it's short distance, but yeah, it's dangerous, scary when you first go up there.
And like you said, the seas may not be calm that day.
No. When you get overseas, it's a whole lot different than when you're in the States, because you're going on carrier quals where you're getting pilots that never landed on a carrier. For the first time, they're coming out and landing on a carrier. It's not like a runway.
It moves.
It's moving. So our pilots, to the yellow shirts and to the people that work on the flight deck, our pilots are the most important thing on that ship. So our whole job, or our job, is to make sure they get off and come back. That's what yellow shirts do. You got blue shirts on the flight deck that are plane pushers. They work for the yellow shirts. And then you got the red shirts, which is crash fire rescue. You got the green shirts that are ordnance. They're primarily squadron. The squadrons are only assigned to the carrier when it goes out. They're not assigned, they're stationed in San Diego, Alameda, all over the West Coast. But when they come out at temporary duty. But we always got the same squadrons back every time we took a major cruise overseas. But we had to teach the pilots how to land on those carriers. So one of us was always down there off of San Diego or down in that area doing carrier quals. And then we'd go in and do maintenance and our training was based a lot on the squadrons that we had coming out for training, and they would do efficiency inspections on our flight deck crew, hangar deck, or the snipes, the enginemen, and our what we call the white hats, the ones that took care of the maintenance on the ship.
So when you're launching and doing these sorties into Vietnam, how many people are up on that deck buzzing around at once?
About 600.
Yeah.
And being flight directors, you have to watch all of the personnel from the squadrons, because you'll have them walk by jet intake. They only get to do it once. You have them walk into props. They only get to do that once. It's just, it's the things, and you're having to watch these people make sure that they're not endangering your plane first or themselves, because you're only worth 20 seconds on that flight deck. That's it. That's your life expectancy. For those that aren't ship's company, that's your life expectancy.
So when they flew into Vietnam, how far in were they able to go? All the way? Where were they?
Yeah.
Where were their main?
Targets, I don't know, but we flew all over.
Okay.
I mean, we flew from, when we were over there, we went into North Vietnam.
Okay.
That was when we first went over there as a combat mission. Yeah, we were in North Vietnam, primarily. We thought after a while that the holes would be deep enough to go to the other side of the world. Because they said they bombed the same places so many times.
That was a lot of intelligence kind of missions then, wasn't it?
Yeah, the intelligence, I mean, it was, you got to understand the Vietnam War was political, period. It's all political. At the time, the country needed it for economy. But, and a lot of us feel like if JFK hadn't been killed, it would have been a short-lived war. It wouldn't have been as long as it was. Because even we got the feeling, being the first groups over there, we got the feeling that they wanted us to do what we were supposed to do, but they were limited, the pilots were limited to target areas. But I know they did, they started going into Cambodia, across the border. So things changed with every trip over there. Of course, I only made one Westpac, which is what we went our tour.
Yeah.
And then I went to, when I left the Midway, because it was going into decommissioning, I hated to. In fact, we had one guy that was on the Midway for 21 years.
Wow.
Retired. That was the only place he had ever been from boot camp on, sitting on the pier crying. Because, I mean, all of us that were ship's company, we loved that ship.
Well, you lived on it.
Well, yeah, we lived on it. But there's not as much ship's company as there is aircraft maintenance personnel. But they come in with their squadron. So most of the time there's just only about 1,600 of us. The other 2,000 come in with the squadrons.
Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of times people will ask you, well, did you know so-and-so? If he didn't work for me, I sure didn't.
Yeah, it's a small city.
Yeah.
So you said the war was political. What did you know about the war when you went in? And how did your knowledge change as you were there?
Well, there was nothing when I first went in the Navy. I mean, yeah, Vietnam was a conflict, but we weren't involved that much in it. I mean, we weren't doing what we did was when we first took that carrier battle group in there. We weren't that far off land. I mean, it was kind of like off the coast of California. We had MiGs come out at us one time. And the old World War II prop jobs got them in a dogfight, shot two of them down, the other one took off. That was as close as they ever got to ship.
Yeah.
The old World War II prop jobs could turn around on a dime, jets can't. So they just started flying in a circle, come up underneath them. But we lost pilots over there. I had a friend of mine that was an A1 pilot that we lost in '65 over there.
What happened to him?
He got shot down, and they never found his body They knew exactly where his plane was, but never found his body. And I was up in Colorado Springs, or not Colorado Springs, Cripple Creek, for the POWMIA service. I think it was in 2010. No. Yeah, 2010. And they announced his name as one of those they'd brought home that year. I mean, I fell out of my chair. That was the first time I was ever able to go look at the Vietnam Wall.
Yeah.
It was because they had the traveling wall up there.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally went over there to say goodbye to him, because it was a hard deal, you know, because I knew him personally.
It's got to feel, I mean, I know there's different ways it feels in combat, you know, when you're right there alongside somebody. It's got to feel strange to send somebody off and them just not come back.
Bad deals. You have to understand how attached we were to our pilots. I mean, we looked at their name every day going off the ship. All day long, all night long, because their names were painted on the planes. But for the most part, we actually knew the pilots. There wasn't that many of them. There were probably 250 pilots for 103 planes, but you just, and it was, I mean, they had to have the trust in our ability to do our job. And we had to trust them to do their job, because it's just a real close camaraderie. That, I mean, you're bonded to each other. So when you don't have one come back, it bothers you. Yeah. I mean, big time.
I remember I've heard tapes from the Ranger, that my experience with the Ranger, that as they were flying sorties into Desert Storm, mm-hmm. the admiral would come on and talk about where they were going and send you prayers and that sort of thing. Did they do that over the intercom?
No, we didn't get a lot of that.
Yeah.
We didn't get that. We just didn't understand a lot of what was going on. We were cited for combat, but we were also got meritorious service awards because of it, but we really didn't understand everything that was going on in country. We were not in country. We were still considered Blue Water Navy back then. So, yes, we were in a combat situation. No, we weren't on land. It's just a whole different deal. But you still got involved in everything that was going in over there, because a lot of times we'd be in the control tower, and the Army people and Marine people would be calling close air support, and you were listening to your pilots. Mm-hmm. And they were coming in on strafing runs their shells were hitting 15 feet from our people. But pilots were good. The A4 pilots and the A1 pilots were good at it. They could do it. They could go in close air support. So the Army, and they were coming down treetop level. And the Army Marines they depended on that. Right. Especially in the very beginning, it was, because they had so much across the street fighting, I guess you'd want to call it.
Yeah. How were you treated when you came back? Did people consider Navy part of the Vietnam War? I mean, did they have that perspective?
Oh, you didn't want to know me when I came back.
Oh. Why did I not want to know you?
just because of the attitude of the people.
What would that make you do?
I wasn't very nice. They were talking about people I cared about. And when I was at Sangley Point, Philippines, after I left the Midway, I was on the flight crew and had to go over there and get those people. They weren't treated the way they are now, the KIAs. They were put in a black body bag and then they had racks they'd put them in and would load them on a plane.
So that was part of your job in the Philippines?
Yeah, well, I was in charge of crash fire rescue, but one of the pilots that I flew with, he was an E8 chief. I flew with him up at Whidbey Island when I first went in the Navy, and he was a good pilot. They were better than the officers on the recips. But I was loadmaster mech, and when he seen me come into Sangley, I didn't know he was there, and I heard somebody holler my name. And I looked at him and I said, no, 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 no. He said, yes, 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 yes. You are on that aircraft when I go over there because I need somebody to get us in and out. Because recips aren't like, we had real long glide path.
What do you
with
mean
prop
when
jobs.
you say recips?
Prop jobs,
Okay.
the old planes. The
Okay.
C-118s and R5s were involved in the Berlin airlift, so they're quite a bit older plane. But they were slow and steady.
Okay.
So when we were coming in, Da Nang wasn't so bad because it's a lot closer to the water. Saigon, you took a lot of small arms fire, and you could hear it. So my job was to get the most available power in and out the way the plane's loaded. Sometimes I restricted the mechs on I had to tell them exactly how many gallons of fuel to put in a plane. If we were going to Tachikawa or if we were going to Subic. There was times we came into Subic sputtering.
But you didn't want to be too heavy either.
No. I wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. So I had to have the weight ability to get us up in the air away from ground fire as quick as possible.
Would you like some water?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My throat's going away on
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
But, so, in the almost 9 years that I spent, went through a lot of different stuff. But
Yeah. I can't imagine what one of those missions would be like to bring the KIAs.
well, we weren't supposed to have to do that. Clark Air Force Base was supposed to do that. But there was a lot of times they had their C-130 would go down or one of their planes because they had to go over there every day. But that's just what they did. They had C-130s there that would fly to Clark, and then they would just back and forth. But we went in just leftovers, because I couldn't take everybody.
How many would you bring back when y'all went?
Well, if we were on an ambulatory flight, I'd get about 60 people that were, could get on and off by themselves. I can get 60 people and still get us out of there safely. Body bag racks had to go all the way to the back. So I had to shift everything else as far forward as I could get it. So it was a whole lot different So we were limited. I would only allow 7 racks to come in. And there's 4-door rack. So that's 28. Because I had to cover it off to put ambulatory patients in.
Right.
And very limited to how many people I'd get in ambulatory patients because of the weight difference. Because up forward, we had to have enough fuel to get to Subic.
Right. Were there times you didn't think you were going to come back?
You know, I never worried about it. Had a job to do. And we did it. We had to trust each other. And I think the one thing that people here don't understand is when you go in the service, especially if you've ever been in a foreign country, you have a camaraderie that you can't bring home with you. When you come home, you're lost. Even your own family, you don't trust the way you do the people you work with in the military. You lose that feeling. You don't have to like the guy next to you. You might want to whip his butt every time you get on the beach. But when you're working, you know he's got your back. He knows you got his back. So it's throughout the service, and I don't care if you're in the Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, anything. When you're over in another country, it's a whole lot different than you are here. Nobody ever comes home the way they left. And that's something, being in the Veterans of Foreign Wars, I preach that to everybody. Nobody ever comes home the way they left.
How many lessons are we learning from Vietnam that are helping or at least helping us understand what we should do for soldiers now who are caught
Well,
up?
they understand the problems now. Anybody, it's like my son is a fireman at Pantex. He's a captain out there, and he goes to a lot of wrecks out on I-40 in Randall County and Potter County. And they're usually the worst ones. But Pantex makes them go through so many hours of debriefing. It's counseling.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I think is absolutely necessary for all first responders.
And it was necessary for Vietnam
It was necessary
veterans.
for us, but nobody considered it. It was necessary for World War II vets, but nobody considered it. Korea.
You're just supposed to be men and
Yeah.
man up, huh?
Well, you know, most of us came home and just talked to a bottle. Yeah. 30 years. I didn't even. I'm closer to my children today than I ever was because they didn't understand me. I had 5 wives. It's typical Vietnam vet.
How much do you think that had changed if those things were in place?
Now the guy's coming back because I don't like a lot of things that they're making them do because they're going on more deployments.
Right.
And I think that takes a lot away from them. And it makes them more dangerous to themselves when they're having to go back because they know they probably have to go back again. So they're a danger to themselves, I think. you know, and I admire the young men and women both going into services today, because it's a whole different combative situation. I mean, yeah, they had women with babies on their back over in Saigon that would have a grenade and walk up to a group of people, pull pin. But now you got kids walking into a group of people with IEDs, and somebody else has got a remote. They don't know what they're doing, you know, and they have to put up with that over there. That's scary.
It is
So,
scary.
Being involved so much as I am with the Veterans of Foreign Wars, I'm trying to reach out to those guys, because what they're going through is actually worse than what we went through. But they don't realize it, because they're just like we were when we came home. Suck it up, buttercup.
You said you went to the wall. We're bringing a half-scale replica of the Vietnam Wall to Amarillo as part of this project in December. We didn't choose the date. But how do you think that will help people? What kind of value is there, learning value is there in that?
I went to the wall the first time last year. I've been to the traveling wall. It's okay, but it's more people that haven't been there go to see the wall, just to see what it is.
Right.
You know, we call them gawkers. But going to the wall in D.C. this last year, they tried to get me to go for 5 years on a flight. It scared the hell out of me, thinking about the wall, because you stop and think. I knew people on that wall from 65 to 68. When I put my hand on the wall, I didn't know any of those that I brought back. But I could feel them all the way down that wall. To me, that was the most healing process anybody could ever go through. Just to know, hey, thank you. You know, I don't know how to explain it.
What do we need to know? I mean, us, school kids, all of those things about the Vietnam War that we don't know. What's important?
To us, the reasons for the war. Knowing how we were treated coming home. You know, I mean, people in that era were just so against everything, and they still are. People aren't like they were in the early 60s. I mean, everybody around now just, as long as they're not involved in it, it doesn't have anything to do with them. So they don't care. That's the way you feel anymore. People, you know, I think more history ought to be taught to schools. There's nothing in schools that I know of about the Vietnam War, about Kuwait. Everybody is trying to be so don't hurt anybody's feeling attitude. I don't care.
And part of this project will put some of that into schools. We have a partnership with Region 16 Education Service Center, and they will take pieces of interviews that we're doing, and they're building curriculum around it for all different age levels.
Well, I mean, we had a lot of history.
Right.
We had a lot of math in school. Had to do a lot of science. Only thing I hated was English. God, I can speak English, I think. But anyway, I don't think that they get the hours, they just don't get the knowledge. Plain and simple. I had a nephew of mine that came out here graduating from the same high school that I graduated from and couldn't figure out how to balance a checkbook. And I called his mother up, read her the riot act. She said they don't teach them anything.
So it was a good thing you wound up in the Navy rather than Marines when you look at
the Navy. The only reason I got out was because they wanted me to be a babysitter because everything was changing in the late 60s. I'm not a babysitter. I never had a job in the Navy that I was supposed to be a babysitter. Now, had I gone and done what they wanted me to do, I wouldn't have been put in that situation because I was supposed to come back, go to San Diego and teach SAR school, or SEER school, escape and evasion. But my mindset, I wouldn't have. I'd have hurt somebody or someone.
is that related? Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
because I'd been through SEER schools.
Mm-hmm.
When you're on flight crews, you're pulled off the plane with what you got on. Go to SEER school.
Yeah.
So it can, SEER school is a training, and you absolutely believe that you are a prisoner of war. But then they lie to you about it too, because they tell you if you make it back to the base, because we had a very good SEER school at Whidbey Island, and we got back to the base. Of course, the SEER school is about half mile off the coast of Washington. Nobody knows it's out there or what's out there. But they didn't let us spend the night and get a hot meal when we got back. Not supposed to knock the guard out. But me and a buddy of mine did.
Uh-oh.
We were a little meaner than they were. We were both farm boys.
There you go.
They didn't know about farm boys.
Well, thank you for your service and thank you for your time.
I appreciate what you're doing. I really do.